everybody, welcome back to Horror Flicks with Nick. Today I'm reviewing See For Me, a horror thriller coming to Shudder later this week. See For Me is about a blind woman hired to house sit a secluded mansion on the night that it is broken into by three thieves looking for a hidden safe. Now, in order to survive, the blind woman must rely on a retired army veteran talking her through the whole ordeal over video call. I was pretty intrigued by that premise. It reminded me of both Hush and Don't Breathe, two home invasion thrillers about senses I absolutely loved. Plus, this was also distributed by IFC Midnight. IFC Midnight is right up there for me with studios like A24 and Blumhouse when it comes to new horror releases. If I see the IFC Midnight logo before any new horror movie, I am instantly way more interested in that movie. Some of my favorites from IFC Midnight include Autopsy of Jane Doe, Backcountry, The Hallow, The Nightingale, Sputnik, Come True, The Vigil, Baskin, Rent-A-Pal, Ghost Stories, Depraved, A Dark Song, and The Devil's Candy. Most of my favorite horror films of the last decade have been IFC Midnight releases. So that leads to a question. Was See For Me another one of my favorites? Well, that question leads to an answer. No, it wasn't. I did not like this movie at all. See For Me starts with a whimper. In its first 35 minutes, absolutely nothing interesting happens. The lead character Sophie watches old videos, takes a taxi, goes to the house sitting gig, walks around forever, gets locked outside, makes some video calls, and looks at bottles of wine. By the time the plot actually kicked off, I was already so completely uninvested and bored. As well, See For Me did a really poor job in its opening of getting me to care about lead character Sophie. The formula behind a home invasion movie should be simple. Have a likable character that audiences care about, get caught in a dangerous scenario, and then consistently raise the stakes in order to get audiences anxious and on the edge of their seats. A big problem with See For Me was that Sophie was not likable at all. Her character was independent to a fault, always refusing help, rude to everyone around her. And yeah, sure, I get that's part of her character flaw, that's part of her overall arc, but this unlikability wasn't balanced with any positive traits or endearing qualities. As a result, I couldn't give less of a shit about Sophie. Once the invaders arrived, I will say some of the suspense sequences were fairly solid. There were a number of scenes I liked, with Sophie stumbling through rooms, narrowly missing the invaders as they turned corners. But honestly, even these entertaining moments were few and far between. After the boring 30-minute opening, we get 10 minutes of the premise that we were promised, followed by another 20 minutes of nothing that dragged the movie to a halt. If I wasn't reviewing See For Me, I 1000% would have turned it off during the first hour. The worst thing about See For Me is just how uninteresting it was. See For Me is an unthrilling thriller. As a whole, See For Me was a very forgettable movie that didn't hit the highs of Hush or Don't Breathe, didn't reinvent the home invasion genre in any way, and that I will probably never think about again after this review. I give See For Me a 4 out of 10. See For Me comes out on Shudder on April 7th. I know this wasn't the most glowing endorsement, but if you generally like home invasion thrillers, this movie does have some positive reviews, and you definitely may enjoy this way more than I did. Also, if you don't want to leave this video without a recommendation, definitely check out the 13 other IFC Midnight movies I mentioned earlier in the video. I'll put a link to all 13 in the description below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, Horror Flicks with Nick. Twice a week I post horror reviews, commentaries, and short recommendations for horror movies you should watch on Netflix and other streaming services. Thanks everyone for watching this week's review of See For Me. I'll see you all next week when I'll be doing another early review for a new Shudder original horror movie. Bye!